I have got some bulk cable, and right next to that I got my Switchcraft. I don't remember the model number, but these are the pancake jacks. I think there are only two types on Redco. It's either the Switchcraft or their own brand. There might be some others, but I'm going with Switchcraft because that's what everybody recommends. I got this heat shrink tubing that you can get for pretty cheap on Redco. This is just for, keeping everything nice and clean at the end of soldering. I got a couple of straight jacks. Those are for very few of the jack types, but there's a couple of situations where these are just the better type. Particularly, you can see here on this connection at the end, I got this straight cable to come from the silencer, and I just like this connection better to kind of signify which ones are in the going outward of the pedal for the most part. So you'll see that in the back as well, and this cable that will go to the front of the amp. Okay, so I got some handy Velcro. I got my measurements for the most part. I might have to measure a couple of things. I'll show you that process. I got that whiskey, which I'm gonna slowly practice on. Ooh, yeah, good stuff. I got this. This is called a Helping Hands. One's pretty rinky-dinky. I don't know what brand it is, but it's just basically the cheapest one on Amazon. This one does work pretty well, except one of these hands comes off, and you have to kind of push it back on with pliers, which is really annoying. So if I was ever to build another pedal board, I might buy a better one of these, but this is going to have to do for now. So I'm going to show you how to solder all of the cables that I got from redco.com. I built most of them, but I'm going to show you the last few, I think. And I also have this solder here. I'll show you the rest of the tools. This stuff is really good. This is a braid. It's called a wick, clean wick braid or something like that. It's basically a metal that you can use to clean off excess solder off of your iron. So in conjunction with a sponge to keep your tip of your soldering iron clean, you can use this when you think you have some burnt excess solder and you want to just get rid of it and start fresh on your tip. This goes really quickly. I'd suggest buying a whole bunch of this if you are going to go into a project. I've been having to go slower with it and use it more sparingly. So I showed you the solder, I showed you the braid. In my handy basket over here, I got scissors. Those are going to be helpful. I have got regular wire clippers. I have got a barbecue lighter, which is going to be for my shrink wrap tubing to keep my pedals my cables all clean. So that's what the barbecue lighter is for. I also have this wire cutter, which can crimp cables of various sizes and keep it really nice and clean when you're doing a lot of cables like I'm doing in this job. So I think this will be helpful for other jobs in the future. So I went and bought a decent one on Amazon, but they're not expensive. I actually have two scissors here for variety, I guess. One's better than the other one. Some needle nose pliers, that's going to be helpful. I also use this Phillips head a bunch. I also have a flathead, or sorry, that was the flathead, this is the Phillips head, and I have those for small connections. And this is something I learned from looking at forums. Razor blade. This is really helpful for building, cutting your cables to the right size and unsheathing them so you can get to the different connections. You'll see more about that later. So you really can use the razor blade. You can use this kind of wire cutter. You can even use this kind of wire clipper if you have really good precision with using it, if it's nice and clean and sharp. But I would suggest the razor blade. is going to do the best job. It just might take a little bit longer. And this style of clipper, once you get really good at it, you can do these jobs really quickly. So I've been trying to get better at these, but I mostly use the razor blade on these examples. So this part is definitely a pain in the ass, soldering all of the cable with all of the pancake jacks, using this helping hands, and my Weller soldering station. Here's the soldering iron. I used to have a couple really cheap ones. I'd say definitely if you're going to be doing a lot of soldering, purchase a high quality one. I had one that I had for probably like, over a decade, that I found that one was pretty cheap, and really couldn't do a big job, could do a small job easily. So I got this soldering station, the Weller soldering station. It's really nice. It has adjustable temperature, so you can get it really nice and hot, which is what you want. I actually left this on for maybe 20 minutes before I'm even using it, which I would suggest just to get it hot. Go over 5 on this if you can. You definitely want it to be really hot, but you can turn it down and adjust it to suit you as well. Alright, so I'm going to show you how I do the soldering of the jacks. So the jacks come nice and quick from Stanford, Connecticut, or Stamford, whatever they call it. And the jacks come in a pouch like this. You have your 2 screws, you have your front and back of the pouch. I've already taken one out, so you can see it here on the helping hands that I'm using. I don't use the magnifying glass, but it's something you would use for circuit boards. So here's the back of it. I just kind of put that aside, and then what I do is I measure my cable. Okay, this is really important. So here is a list of all the paths from my pedals. So I have all the various measurements here, and then I just like a assembly station, just cranked all the cables out for most of these pedals that I have over here. So I'll show you those custom cables. Alright, so I have measured my first cable that I'm going to do for you guys to 34 inches. There's a little extra that I'm adding there, just because I'm not sure how that's the path of that cable, because it's going to the outside of the loop's loop. Sorry, that's really confusing. But I'm going to measure this cable right here. Just there's a tab here. Just stick your cable against it, and then just when you get to the final measurement, just take a trusty Sharpie and literally just make a line, and you are good. And then I'm going to use one of these to crimp it, but just on the inside of here, there's a place where you can just completely crimp any cable. That goes right through. I also keep a regular one for the most part to do my clipping. Everything for a specific task is going to be better. Again, I think when you're doing a lot of cables, you really want to have all the right tools. There's pretty much there's over like 20 connections, pancake jack or regular TS or TRS jacks here. So having all the right tools to do all those will really make this job go quick. From pedal to pedal. So let me just find my measurements. Here they are. Okay, so I actually measured everything. I have the, you can see there, the poly to the silencer, that's 9 inches. Poly to the comp, 7.5. So you can see the various measurements I put on there. So I literally took my trusty tape measure here. So you can literally bend your tape around other pedals and measure from the middle of the jack. You see, this is actually where, in the middle here is where the solder gets connected. So I'm going to measure from the middle of the jack to the middle of the jack here, and that's really the length that I'm going to have. And really, it's really easy when you get used to it to use these to clip it, or the razor blade. So you can pretty much right on. You don't have to really give much extra. You do want the job to be as clean as possible, but just watch out. There are some corners. I'll show you even some ones that I had to remeasure because they were particularly tough angles, or they're going around a lot more pedals than the others. So that's it. You basically just measure the path from one pedal to another. And then we're going to cut that. We're going to use a Sharpie to mark it. And then just, basically what I did was do a bunch of measurements, mark them, and then I, just like a factory, I just cut out all the ones I needed. So first I took a look at the different videos that people were producing to show a bunch of different methods. So I would suggest that's how you use this video as well. Basically, I'm not sure if my methods are 100% the way to do them. This is how I did it, but I would suggest just seeing some other comparisons, and then just kind of stick with the methods that you like the most. So you can see here, I've already started to strip my wires. You take the shield here. I'm going to show you, I'm going to cut them from scratch and then show you how I band them up. But you end up with the shield here, and this is the tip connection, and I'll show you how I solder those on the jack. So I'm going to cut one of these right now. What you want to do is you want to measure this cut, the first cut here for the ground section, the shield section. You want to measure this one with the jack itself. So I put the jack on the helping hand, and then I am going to use my razor blade in this instance, and I'm going to cut from about the middle of this. There's a little raised section on the inside here where it's a perfect place to cut it. You don't need that much, and then you can use some of the shrink tube wrapping, the hot shrink wrapping, to kind of tighten up everything over here, so you don't have any loose errant connections. So I'll show you that as well, but now I'm going to cut with the razor blade on basically until I feel any resistance. Okay, and then I'm going to take that off. I'm going to find that cut again along here. Again, basically just push down until you feel a little resistance at all. You really, with a nice sharp razor blade, just buy yourself a little pack of these. You go through these connectors like butter. So just find your cut, and then you can just kind of roll it. Again, just right to where you feel some resistance. And when you've cut all around, matching your cuts from one side to the other, so you can pull it off with a plier. Alright, so I've gone ahead and done those cuts. Then I'm going to get my pliers over here. Okay, so after I've used my razor blade to cut my cable, gone all the way around, I'm going to just use my pliers here to get the end off. As long as you've mostly made your cuts pretty clean, you can just kind of force the rest of this off, but I might have to just go back in and cut around and make sure I got all of this cable plastic cut off. So I did that now. So when you do a bunch of these one right after another, you get quicker and quicker at it. So that's why I like to do it assembly style. I do all of one thing, then do all of another thing. So I measured all of my cables on this list I showed you guys earlier. So that really helps to just get better and better at each one of these techniques. This is kind of a pain in the ass. It took me a while to get this right, so don't be frustrated. Yeah, you might waste a couple of cables, You know, but you can always kind of scrap the jacks and use them for another pedal. But you might end up throwing out some cable. But luckily, the thick is not expensive, and the thinner is even cheaper. So, you know, you can go again on Redco. That was the best that I found. But you know, there's plenty of sites I think that do this. So even though Redco had a shipping price, the prices were really cheap. And then just made sure to order a lot when I ordered. You need, for each cable, you need 2 of these jacks, and the jacks are actually more expensive than the cable. So get ready for that price. So this is really the most expensive part of the whole thing. I think these go for $3.50 or $4 or so, and then there's different styles. The other ones that I have here are just like the regular straight cables that you're used to with your guitar cables, and these I think were $2. Okay, so there's all different prices. I went with Switchcraft. Everyone says Switchcraft. I got Switchcraft. Boom. I just finished getting my shield all put together after cutting off the tube on the outside. There's also an inside core tube here too, and we're gonna expose that. So you really don't need much for this one. I cut maybe ½ an inch, I think, or maybe 3/4 of an inch, but definitely less than an inch off of the end here. And just like I did the other one, you really cut through it like butter. And this is even easier to just kind of wrench off with your pliers. So just, you know, get a good hold and just yank that off. There is a plastic tubing in here, so when you've exposed this, make sure that it's actually the copper that's on the outside, not the plastic tubing that's on here, the clear plastic tubing as opposed to the black tubing, because you need to tin these connections so that you can get a nice connection on your pancake jack. So I'm going to now take the cables that I made. I have both sides nice and exposed. I winded together like so on both sides, and then I'm going to tin these before I attach it to the pancake jack. So I use my trusty helping hands here, and I'm going to just clip these up here, and I am going to take my solder. I'm going to take my soldering iron. I'm going to make sure that clip is I'm going to make sure the tip is clean by rubbing it here on my sponge. You can see here that it's nice and silvery. That's a nice clean tip. Again, I showed you the braid earlier as well that you can use to keep that tip clean, and then you can wipe all sides of it on the sponge when you need it. So tinning is really important. What you want to do is heat up the copper a little bit on both sides, the braid, the inside core shield, and this other connection here, the other shield, which you braided all together. So I heat those up, and then I just take the solder and just get that on the tip there on both sides of these. Okay, on this bigger cable here, which I'm probably going to clean up a little bit, I usually add just a little bit extra solder if I have to go further back in this connection. But this, if you're really good at soldering, you'll use less and less solder. You won't waste so much. I wasted a lot on this project. You know, it obviously depends on how much you have to do and how often you solder. But you know, obviously when you're doing a project this big, you want to keep all supply costs as low as possible. I think by the end of this, I can tell you at the end how much this costs, but I'm thinking with all the things I ended up buying, probably $1,000. You know, so that's why I'm really hoping that this is the only one I'll have to build, and I got all the right pedals for the sounds that I'll want, because I'm not gonna always be buying tons of pedals because I can't really afford that. So hopefully this is kind of a professional pedal board on the cheap. So I showed you how to do one of these. I'm not going to show you how to do the other one. It's just the same process, but I will show you how to attach it to the jack. Okay, so I'm now ready to attach my cable to the pancake jack. What I try to do is match the helping hands, the cable on the helping hands, and the pancake jack on the helping hand, and I want to match where this small inner cable will attach to the tip, and then the larger shield outside cable is going to attach to the ground section. Now this is the part I haven't really gotten perfected. I'll show you what I did. I can't tell you it's exactly right, but again, you can check other videos. So like I tinned the wires, I'm actually going to tin the pancake jack a little bit, just to give myself a nice place to put the cable. So I'm going to tin the jack just like I did the cables. So this way I can get a nice landing spot for each of my connections with the solder. Again, I think I'm wasting a little bit of solder when I do this step, but you know, you can look at other methods that people have used, but this is the method I used. And I did get pretty good connections, but again, I would, you know, if you're doing a big job, you're building pedal boards for somebody else or that kind of thing, you want the connections to look all clean. So you know, you want to focus on trying to, you know, not waste solder, or make sure you don't leave a pool of solder anywhere, because that can short out your jacks. Okay, so I just did one end. I don't know how good that connection is. I'm going to test it later. So what I tried to do here was solder, tin a little bit on the tip, and then connect my tin wire to that. So I put a little extra solder there. Again, you know, you can do cleaner jobs. But I attached to the tip. I think you actually want it mostly on this outer ring, actually, not on the inside. So sometimes I might have to fix that connection, push it out a little bit. Same thing with the ground section, which is the first outer wire that you're bundling up. I add like a little puddle of solder underneath on the inside part here, and then I connect my tin wire to that. This is the connection I have the toughest time with, because you got to get it to the ground, but sometimes you can burn this like little plastic coating, I think, that's on the bottom here. So you want to be really clean and quick when you do this connection. So, you know, again, you can look at other videos and see how they did this, but that was my the best method I had. We'll test these connections right after this, so that I can show you how to use the battery tester to see if you got good connections. There's kind of good enough connections and perfect connections, at least as far as I can tell. This really helps, and this is part of the reason why I'm building cables myself, is that I want really solid connections so I can keep the noise floor as low as possible when you're running all these pedals. So that's part of the reason why I have the silencer. Some people don't really think that you always need a noise gate when you're doing a project like this, because noise gate and even the compressor that I have might harm my dynamics and you know, give me an effect I don't really like. But I personally just like what they kind of do. Most of my effects I use really subtly anyways. I would suggest that this is pretty simple sound-wise pedal board, but there are a lot of pedals and connections and routing stuff going on. So, you know, it is a lot going on. I just don't think that, you know, I have any wacky sounds in this pedal board. So next thing I do is I put both ends of the heat shrink tubing. This stuff is really good to keep your connections at the end of the wire really clean. You see here where we've exposed some of it. I'm going to actually take this tubing and get it as high up as possible to cover both of these connections and keep that from shorting out from other pieces of metal that might contact it. So I actually go ahead and with the side without the jack, first I'm going to cut this heat shrink tubing just like this, and then half. You can see like this. I just cut them in half, okay, and then put them over the end exposed. Remember to always, after you've done one jack, to then do your heat shrink tubing, cut it, and get it on, because What's going to happen is if you try to put this other jack on and then you try to put the heat shrink tubing on, you won't be able to get it over the wire. So you want to make sure that this is on before you solder the final connection, or if you want, you can just do it when you start a wire. That way there's just no chance of forgetting. And this is really cool because all you do at the end is, this is why I have the barbecue lighter in my pack. I just go ahead and push this heat shrink tubing. Sometimes I got to get some of this excess solder that I added out of the way so I can get it up here as far as possible. Nice to keep your connections clean and, you know, hopefully prevent it from shorting out anywhere. I can't always get it as high as I want, but this is what I have right now. So, you know, I can't really say that I'm the best at doing this, but so far I've gotten good enough results that I think they'll be able to last a while. So either way, I'm going to then take my barbecue lighter and then light my heat shrink tubing. You don't need that much to get it to shrink a little bit, but you just get it on both sides, inside and on the edge here. I didn't even need to leave it that long, but what it does is just as it heats up, it tightens up around your wires, and then when you close your pancake jack, this is nice and neat. So I like that. You could add a little bit extra of that unshrink tubing on the outside here if you didn't cut it in half perfectly. If you had some excess, you can actually just put it over these connections too to make sure for the same reason, to make sure you have nice and clean connections. I do that sometimes if I feel like the soldering job is really poor, but for the most part I try not to use up too much of that stuff because it also goes quick. There's 20 connections here. So you don't want to spend a whole bunch of extra time doing that shrink tubing and recutting them. And I've actually already had to order a second set of those. They went quicker than I expected. So they're really nice though, nice and neat. So then I'm just going to take the two screws that come with the Switchcraft pancake jack. I put the screws on first before I try putting them on the pancake jack, just to get them in there quickly, and then I just push those down right over it. I'm going to get my flathead screwdriver and just make sure, you know, once you get one in, you can get the other one in pretty easily. So get one started, get the other one started, just to make sure it's all lined up nicely. And once that's going, just tighten it all the way down. So this is the completed jack. So you can see the front, the back, the two screws. I screwed it with the regular jack, and then also you see the heat shrink tubing, which I use the barbecue lighter to heat up, and it just automatically contracts around there. You don't really need to take much time. So I'm going to do the other one. So I'm actually doing two more cables here. Or excuse me, one more cable here, but two more connections on the pancake jacks. But I got different styles. Actually, it's not pancake jack. Sorry, it's this straight kind. And there's some pitfalls with this one, so I just wanted to show you. You kind of got to figure out what's right for the project, and you know, basically once you connect all the pedals, do these jacks actually fit next to each other? The pancake jacks are actually kind of wide, so they don't actually fit in every context next to another pancake jack. So you might have to get some of these straight ones, or even like the right angled ones that aren't pancake jacks. They're more like this style, but these are a little different. This one has this part that unscrews off of it, which I would call the back, I guess, and then it has this plastic sleeve that goes over it, and this is your tip and this is your ground on this one. I connect to the ground down here, and then this part at the end here of the ground clips around your wire and hold it into place. Then you put this on to, you know, prevent from shorts, and then you have to screw this on. So in this one, it's really important that you put these on on the pedal, on the cable, first over this piece. So I'll just show you that now. And in the right direction. You can do it after you've done one jack, but this one, if you don't get it before you solder the second jack, you can't put it on. So I'm just getting a close-up for the cable tester. Okay, so here I'll let this connection exposed because if I have to fix this, I don't want to have it touch the shrink tubing. I felt a little bit more confident on this one, but this one wasn't perfect. So I'm going to make sure all these lights light up. So what I do is put both ends in all the way, again making sure they're not still hot. As I was trying to let you know, some people actually do their soldering on this thing and get their tip both sides set up, and then they can just go right to the test. I just don't like that because this gets really hot, and maybe that's just because how slow I am at doing it, but I don't want to damage the battery tester. So I do it in the helping hands, which even has this magnifying glass if you needed it. I don't bother, but I find these very handy. You can really manipulate them to get the right angles. So I got both my pancake jacks connected in here. Okay, I haven't attached this last heat wrap sheeting if I need to fix this. And what you have here is your ring, your tip, and your sleeve side. I don't really get why there's 9 and why you don't get a complete connection on sometimes. You don't get the tip, the ring, or the sleeve, one or the other is missing, and anything, but I try to get all 9 set up. So again, someone might have a better sense of how to do this. Then on this side, you have the intermittent tester. And so these all light up, all the ones that will light up, all the connections that will light up at the same time. And then if you hit reset, any connection that's not good of these 9 lights, this light will turn off to let you know that that connection is not perfect. So let's see what we got here. All the way to the top for cable test mode. All right, and you can see all 9 lights came on, so this is great. Sometimes I see like 1 or 2, or it looks like, tic-tac-toe, from diagonal to diagonal, and I don't know why. That connection still seems to work pretty good. I've done some tests on those, but I'm not quite sure why a good connection won't have all the lights. But I try to get this kind of all lit up. So I got to show you the intermittent test of this as well. I still have this exposed, and I turned it on. I got all my 9 lights. This is really good. And then what happens is, actually I'm going to turn this off and turn it back on again. So you see you get all 12 lights here. And then this intermittent test will tell you if any of these are shorting, tell you how good a connection you have. So if you hit reset, they should all turn off. Okay. Now, if one stays lit, that means that you have a bad connection, and if you shake these, it would go on and off, and so that you know that it's not a great connection. But this is actually a really good one. I did a good job here. I'm getting better.